Welcome to week 6 of Sarazanmai, the Kunihiko Ikahara show, which makes less and less sense each episode goes by, but somehow makes more and more sense. And we're thematically just going absolutely berserk in this show. And things somehow are so progressing so well that I'm kind of doubting that they are progressing this well. Because for some reason, the show just makes more and more sense as it goes by, which is good for a show. And last week was important because we got our first break from the formula. We got the first time that the boys didn't complete the Sarazanmai and get what they wanted to get and get out of Dodge with their Sara dish and their dish of hope and everything like that. And now we're on week 6. Things have broken down. They were out of sync last episode. Bunch of very good comments on the reaction from last week where they mentioned a bunch of good pun explanations. They mentioned that the kids were out of sync when they were doing the song. Just a bunch of great explanations. So if you're going to watch last week's video before watching this one, definitely check out the comments as well. I feel like that's part of the interaction at this point. We've gotten to the stage where the show is so deep that really takes a couple people to analyze it. And the comments do a pretty good job of doing that. So I'm pretty sure the comments in this section will be just as well. So that was enough dilly-dallying for this week. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I just wanted to mention this because the person who mentioned it last time just blew my mind when they said this. The sachet, it's the same lucky item as the last episode. So clearly, when we move from episode to episode, it doesn't matter what the lucky item directly determines what the subject of the episode is going to be. So last week it was a sachet or a Nioi no Fukuro, which someone explained in the comments also meant smell of mother or mother's smell or something like that, which if you watched last week's episode makes perfect sense because last week's episode is all about his relationship with his birth mother and how he feels that she was something that he thought he wanted, but when he met her, he felt like she was a completely different person, and he realized that his family are his real family and all that. And also that particular meeting was fateful because that's the meeting where Haruka had his traffic accident that ended up with him being in a wheelchair. So it bears double significance for him. And that may be why we're getting 2 episodes in the first place, right? We got 1 episode to deal with the whole birth mother thing. At the very end, they dropped this bomb on us that Haruka is in a wheelchair because of this particular incident where he went to meet his birth mother without anyone else's knowledge. And I assume they're going to deal with that this episode. That's why we have the same lucky item, the sachet. Vaguely homoerotic frog wrestling. I'm all the way in. This show cannot get any weirder and I love it. Yo. This is next level meta. They're addressing the fact that they do everything in 1 episode chunks within the show. And this show has been pretty meta even like thus far just because of how self-aware its magical girl transformation sequences are and just everything that it deals with. Like it treats it like it is, which is ridiculous, and it addresses that it is ridiculous. The characters themselves say that, but this is pretty nice to see that it's continuing to be meta, like just going all the way throughout the show saying we're doing 2 things in a row. It's like sometimes when you watch a serialized show, you see an episode where something continues and the characters address that. It really makes you feel like, oh, okay, so they're doing this for a purpose. Like they're departing from the formula for a purpose. And I have no doubt that they are departing from the formula for a purpose. So let's keep watching. Wait, what? Okay. Oh, this is one of those random episodes. Everything's just going to be like extra random this episode. I appreciate you very much, show. It's pretty funny that now that he's been exposed that he cross-dresses Azuma Sara-chan, that now he chooses to run away. You would think that when his brother had an accident and he felt he had to blame himself, like then would have been the time to make a similar decision. But it's funny that only when his concern and grief masked behind the embarrassment of dressing up as an idol was exposed that he ultimately did choose to run away. And he didn't really run away so much as just embrace the Kappa life, like engaging in sumo wrestling and eating cucumbers very enthusiastically. It really seems like he's trying to pretend that the Kappa life is for him when we clearly know that it really isn't. And that disenchantment I think is going to come out in the next few minutes. Oh, it's the otter app! It's happening. It's finally happening. We're learning what the otter app actually is. Okay. So we know that the policemen are the bad guys and they're somehow involved with this otter app, but we don't exactly know how it works. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. So this whole time, he's been extracting desire from people. He's been extracting desire from people because desire is somehow to him like pathogenic or like just kind of unwanted in society. He represents like the state, the higher authority, kind of coming down on the people and then imposing his version of what things should or should not be like on the people, right? That's him. And we don't know which of the policemen have a crush on the other one. If the other one has a crush on this one, then he went away because he felt like his desire was going to conflict with the duties that he has to do. So far, every single episode, he meets someone who has unconventional desires and he extracts that desire from them. And then the boys go and turn that person, set them free from their demon form by performing Sarazanmai on them. And by finding out that at the core of their desire is some kind of love, right? So the fundamental binary that the show sets up, or that the policemen set up, is that there's desire or love, and one is bad and one is good, right? And I could go into a whole philosophical diatribe about this, this binary being set up. So this is literal deconstruction, okay? Deconstruction, the term, is primarily used when you're deconstructing a pre-set up binary and showing that it's not really binary, it's more complicated than that. This show is doing exactly that with desire or love. The policeman is categorizing them into two categories, desire and love, and categorizing one of them as pathogenic, unwanted, and one of them as good and contributive to society, which is love, right? So he finds all these people who have desires and he banishes them to the demon realm or whatever. And the boys go and they find out that desire and love are kind of the same thing. Like even that dude who wanted to sit with a bag on his head or whatever, he just wanted to be seen, you know, like it's all good. It's all based on positive human emotion. So we finally found out what that was all about. I'm sorry if that was confusing. Leave a comment about how pretentious I am. I'm totally fine with that. Let's keep watching. So the person who was kidnapped by the policeman this week is Yasaka Haruka. You hear that, comments? Yasaka Haruka. Tell me what that means. I know it means something. Kawauso Koban. Right? Don't know what that means? That's clearly a pun because it's the otter police box. The otter is some kind of pun that's really important in this episode. And I feel it's been important all along. We just haven't picked up on that it was a pun. I thought it was a symbol for something. Probably the word for otter in Japanese has something to do with this. These guys are the Imperial Army. I was about to say something when he literally picked up this kid from under the watchful nose of his dad and just dragged him out. I was like, how come he didn't get stopped? I think the policemen are also some kind of supernatural creatures, because they seem to operate on a different plane than the other policemen. They have their own headquarters and stuff. Clearly they're involved in some other supernatural level stuff. I don't know what kind of mythical creature that is. They said Imperial Army. Do they mean the literal Imperial Army, like the early like 1900s Imperial Army that Japan had? I don't know, but it's some like next level stuff. They've been doing this Yokubo ka Aika this whole time, and I didn't pick up on this whole thing that they were setting up. I had to be told expressly. Call me retarded, because I clearly am. I didn't pick up on this at all. Probably not the best thing for me to just watch this episode, this whole musical sequence every time and still not get that they're setting up this binary of desire and love. But at least I picked up now, so better late than never. Aha, and there's the explanation. So the otters and the kappas have been at war. Don't ask me why that makes sense, but that explains why the otter is the symbol. Maybe it's not a pun. Maybe it's that it's just a mythological thing. Because remember, this does very heavily involve mythological elements. The boys are kappas after all. They're historically, mythologically accurate kappas. It's used as a storytelling device to explain like relationships and secrets and everything. But it is, at the end of the day, mythology. So the otters, represented by these policemen, please have the policemen turn into otters. I want that to happen at some point because that would just be perfect if that does happen. The policemen represent the otters in this. I'm guessing there's some grand otter at the top that's telling them what to do. I would like to see that otter because the animation in the show is so good. But yeah, otters versus kappas. Make that a movie. Okay, so they're turtles. They're teenagers, they transformed into turtles, and they're in the sewer. Does that remind anyone of anything? I'm just saying, did they go into the sewer on accident? I don't think so. That was a nice little reference there. This whole factory just reminds me of that scene at the end of Monsters Inc. where they have all those doors in that factory. I don't think the symbolism is analogous. I think this is referring to something else, which we'll discuss later, but this factory very much reminds me of that. They've been showing us that animation this whole time too. We just didn't make anything of it because they hadn't given us this explanation. This show is very good at doing this, is just presenting us seemingly innocuous images and sequences and then adding context later, which makes you appreciate that they were doing it the whole time. The show is very good at doing that. Oh god. He had to go and say that. He had to ask that question and he had to get an answer to it. So the Prince Scarrow just offered him basically the only solution he's been looking for this entire time, which is erasing Haruka's accident from ever having happened, and he's willing to sacrifice himself to get that. It's also interesting to note that Kuji also said that the previous Kappa zombies that we defeated will never have existed. He's not saying that we will never have defeated them. That's not what he considers to be bad. He's saying that they wouldn't have existed. That's the bad thing in his mind. Again, pointing out that you don't have to eliminate desires from the society. They can exist with everyone else. I think that's just an important point to point out as well. This is like textbook depression, when you just don't want to exist. This is textbook depression. And they're showing it in such a nice way, where they're just visualizing his character model just moving out of screen while everyone else is happy. If you talk to anybody with depression, they'll explain a similar feeling where they're like, I think if I was not in the world, it would be a better place type feeling. The show does a really good job at visualizing emotive points. And I think that's probably one of the best strengths of the show, is just strong visuals in general, but just the way that they're able to visualize concepts in such an illustrative way, this show definitely deserves like great credit for that. I guess that gun came in handy at the end of the day. I guess it is useful to have a gun to shoot stuff. Oh, well, I guess that character arc, paid off. That thing, where does he keep that when he's a Kappa? He always has that little ankle bracelet around with him everywhere. And he values it. It was in his Kappa-zan box at the very beginning of the show. So they already told us what the character's function motive is at the very beginning of the show. We just didn't understand it because we had to catch up with everything else. But they told us the motivation for every single character at the very beginning. This show is great. This show is amazing. We got the result of the test. It's pure. It can exist in the system. I guess the policemen are going to leave him alone now. I don't know. It even says love or libido at the top of the screen. Okay, show. We get it. We get it, show. I knew he knew. I knew he knew, and I know that you also know that he knew. Well, we definitely knew that he knew that he had a birth mother. That's why he was following him in the first place. Otherwise, his irrational fear of letting him go would not exist. We knew that existed. That's how he got the Nioe Fukuro in the first place, the sachet from his real mom. And he must have talked to her as well. And he's like, oh, this lady's really nice. He might actually leave me for this lady. I don't want him to leave, so I have to do something. That's why he chased him across the street. That's just a great little touch to Haruka's character arc. Oh my god, it's really good. Just before we get to the conclusion of this little mini section where he, rediscovers Haruka, just the sheer emotional impact of him running through that tunnel with the voiceover from Haruka that he's also hearing is pretty insane. The animation is amazing. Him falling and then getting back up. That run through the tunnel was representative of his whole character arc through the show so far. This show is next level. Let's see what happens when he meets his little brother. That's all he wanted to hear this whole time was Enta pass the ball. He's been waiting for this for years. Okay, this is a very creative use of both the soccer theme, which has been running through this whole show, is that all they want to do is play soccer, or that's all the Enta wants to do. And now the Kappa Prince has become a ball, so just kick him. Let's go. Let's just kick him. It's interesting that he said desire assimilated. That is a subtitle. I don't know the actual meaning of what he says, but it's cool to see that he said assimilated, whereas the policemen always say desire extracted when they do their interrogations or whatever. I just think that's an interesting like juxtaposition between assimilation, like incorporating the desire into whatever we're talking about, and extracting, removing it, and the person they interrogate always ends up dead. That's also important to note. Assimilation versus extraction. I want to connect, so I'm not giving up. I'm not going to say anything else. Let's look at the post-credit scene and then talk about it. Okay, so that was, to me, probably the best episode we've seen thus far. I'm not exactly, like, some of the things that we're seeing connected in this episode were set up way back in episode 1. So when they laid this out, they had a whole vision, a whole plan for how they were going to do this whole episode thing from start to end. And that's really great. That's great to see. They knew the connections they were going to make. They knew the little symbolisms, the little things they would drop in at the very beginning that would end up being paid off at the very end. They totally had it all in hand when they started. And when you're watching this week to week, if you were just watching it back to back, you could see that like being paid off immediately. But when you're waiting a week between each episode, it really hits home. Like, it's like, oh, because it kind of hits you like a light bulb, because you're not aware of it from the very beginning because you saw it last week. You didn't see it like 30 minutes ago. So like specifically, just one of the like realizations that I had this episode was that in the very first episode, whatever they had in their box is going to be the driving character motivation for the rest of the show. It's only 12 episodes, and it's not going to work in a way that you think it's going to work. Like, each of them has a secret, and the secret is based on some desire that they had, but the desire, which the policemen think need to be extracted and removed from society, is actually based in love, which can be assimilated into society, right? So you have Kazuki, who has his stuff in a box like Azuma Sarachan. You have Enta, who has his misanga, which is his symbol for him loving Kazuki. Then you have Kuji, who has the gun because he killed somebody. You have all these at the very beginning, and you're only told bit by bit what the actual story is. And now we're halfway through. We know what each of their motivating factors is, and we're ready to move on to the fundamental conflict of the show. And the show is paced so well that only now are the cameos from the policemen actually being paid off, because they've been here the whole time, but only now do we really get to see how pivotal of a role they actually play in all of this. In the post-credit scene of episode 6, we saw that these two policemen are in fact the policemen that first approached the Kappa Prince in his palace when the Imperial Army took over all of the Kappa Kingdom. So we see that there's clearly been some animosity between them for years and years. And it's interesting to note that the one with the glasses, the policeman with the glasses, said, "Those who cannot connect their desires have no future." And now, instead of connecting desires, they're actually extracting desires from people. And he also said the boy's desire was actually love. We have no use for such a thing like that. And I think it's interesting to note that they're policemen being the punitive arm of the state. They're there to punish things that are out of the ordinary or deemed as not acceptable in the state. So when they say we have no use for such a thing as love, it's actually a way deeper statement than it appears on its surface, right? It's not just, oh, the boy loves his brother, we have to let him go. It cuts way deep into like, what is the point of the state in general and policemen? I'm not going to go on for too long. I've already been going on for too long. These episodes have been getting longer and longer just because when you add another piece to the puzzle, it makes the whole thing look like something else entirely. I've already said that this show can be examined in a variety of different reference frames, and each one I think it does provide something worth talking about and worth analyzing individually. If you have any particular reference frame you want to approach this from, I encourage you to do so. I think it is pretty rewarding just watching this show and analyzing it. I'll leave that to you. Tell me what your theory is down in the comments below, because I don't want to make this too long of a video, and we do need stuff to talk about in later episodes. But I am wondering what will happen when the policemen finally confront the Kappa Prince, because of their infiltration of the Otter headquarters, the Kawa Uso headquarters. They did find out about the existence of the Kappa Prince and his ability to make dishes of hope, which is why they want him in the first place. I'm interested to see what their confrontation will be like. So that's it for this episode. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next episode.